Thank you. It's probably one of the most interesting introductions I've ever had. Christopher Pyne, Donald Trump, no association. So let me be clear. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I just want to firstly congratulate Peter and the whole GCOM team on 20 years. And hearing the history this morning, it struck me, there was a recent piece of data I saw, which was that the average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company today is 15 years, when it used to be 75 years in 1915. So to look forward to another 20 years and hope that the people in this room only grow and those relationships grow stronger, I look forward to seeing that. And certainly the Cisco partnership with GCOM is something that we hold very dearly. So what I wanted to touch on today was what we're doing at Cisco around digital transformation. It's certainly a huge topic for us, and it's changing the nature of our business and how we go to market with our partners and how we actually create customer value. And so, you know, with the thought of GCOM and the innovation and the sort of the challenges that they've had over the years and being able to sort of transcend, I want to start off with a brief story and take you back, if I can here, take you back 3 years in my life. As Ian said, I was living in New York City, and my wife and I were getting ready to go out to a function at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it was an Australians in New York City kind of get-together. And I was catching up with a buddy of mine, and we would always end up in the corner like heavily debating business. I mean, scintillating stuff, right? This evening, we got into this conversation around taxi medallions in New York. And of course, for those of you who know, they're a little tin plate, right? A little tin plate which gives you the right to own and operate a taxi medallion in the city. But there was a huge effect or force at play in New York at the time, and that was, of course, Uber, right? And I don't want to talk in platitudes here about another Uber disruption story. I'm sure you've heard all of those before. But the conversation quickly turned to, well, if this is really taking off in New York, and this was quite often the conversation, right? You're in the financial capital of the world. The question becomes, how do you trade it? What's the trade? That was always the question in New York, right, with so many bankers around. And so we had a bit of a chat about this, and I can tell you that we talked about a company called Medallion Financial. They effectively created the finance for these taxi medallions in New York, and were doing super well, right, throughout the 90s and early 2000s, being able to obviously enjoy growth on the appreciation of what these medallions were actually worth. And so Uber was approved in the city, and there were several stoushes at the time with Mayor Bloomberg, lobbyists for the incumbent yellow cabs, and it was quite front page fodder, right, in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal about would the city fully embrace this kind of digital disruption, this innovation, and what was going to become of those famous yellow cabs in New York. So what you can see here is Medallion Financial stock graph continued to go up, right, once Uber got approved. But in the time period here from approval to the peak in the stock of Medallion Financial, Uber went from no rides in New York to 4 million rides annually, right? During that period, yellow cabs went from 14 million rides down to just 11 million rides. And you can see that the writing was on the wall, massive share shift, right? Market share shift between this incumbent and this digital challenger, right? So as we kind of fast forward, here's my buddy Evan and I. This is our big short moment in New York, as it were. And I can tell you we waxed lyrical about this, but we certainly didn't short sell the stock. So this, for me, was a personal missed opportunity during my time in New York to profit from what you see here is really the downfall of this institution, this company, this financial company in New York that was the backbone of the yellow cabs, right? So their stock price there in the autumn of 2013 was around $17 per share. And I checked just this week, I refreshed this every time I sort of use this example, and their stock's worth $3 today. So what's the moral to the story here? The moral to the story here around digital disruption is that it can happen very, very quickly, and the share shifts can take place much quicker, once it starts, much quicker than you possibly think, right? So I just kind of move forward here on this thought of digital disruption and talk a little bit now about, at Cisco, what has this meant to us and how have we started to kind of investigate this, and what does it mean to our business? What are we actually doing to transform ourselves? And so very recently, we formed a partnership with the Swiss business school IMD and formed the Center for Digital Business Transformation. And we kind of asked this question of, we all understand that industries are being reordered, right? They're being reshaped. The boundaries between industries are actually blurring. Your competitor of yesterday is most definitely not the competitor that you'll face tomorrow. And so we kind of studied this question very closely around digital disruption. What's actually happening? And consistent with that example I just gave you, what we found is that 40% of market incumbents, right, large incumbents, will actually be disrupted in the next 3 years to the favor of digital challengers. And by disruption, what I'm getting at there is this huge shift in market share. That was our definition of disruption for the purpose of this study. Yet, boards and the C-suite are really not actually getting the message. Chuck Robbins, our CEO, travels the globe talking to a lot of government business leaders in a variety of sectors, and he sees kind of 3 different digital transformation models. There's companies that are enabling their business, right, in terms of IT, maybe saving some costs. There are those that understand the shift in the customer experience is really, really important, so they're looking to differentiate. But then the final category, and those who I think stand to gain the most, are those that are fundamentally building their business on the back of digital. They're embracing digital as the strategy, IT as the basis of their strategy rather than just a supportive function or an enabler. And so what I wanted to do, as opposed to just stand here and paint this really morbid kind of dreary picture, right, is to actually unpack. So what can we take away from this, right? What is the actual business model that these digital challengers are actually using? How are they actually disrupting these huge, huge companies all over the globe? And can we actually take anything away from that? And I think, I started to see this when I was working in New York. Back then I was working for IBM, and I ran our global ISV and developer ecosystem kind of building function. So I had a team of business development folks and marketing folks, and we went out and we worked with a lot of SaaS founders, right? A lot of software companies that were being born on the cloud native, and fundamentally understood how to drive their business with digital tools and processes. And that was sort of 4 or 5 years ago. But I think it's always the case now, right? The academics are starting to write about this stuff in terms of, well, what's actually going on? Is there a pattern here that we can learn from? So HBR just put out a piece a couple of months ago, and it was called How Platforms Are Reshaping Strategy. And if there's one pattern that I've seen over the last 5 years with digital disruption, it is this. It is this idea that there is a shift from closed and proprietary products, from creating value in a linear value chain, to actually moving to an open platform where you foster an ecosystem. And so I think this is most prevalently kind of understood by us, and it's a simple example. But in 2007, Sony, Nokia, Samsung, Motorola, and LG, right, 5 companies held 90% of the mobile industry's global profits. So there's this shift in both value creation and then value capture, how you're actually capturing profits for yourself, right? So 90% of the value capture sat with 5 companies. And I think we all know the answer here, right, is that today, 92% of global profits around mobile sits with Apple, right? It's an incredible shift in just 8 years, I mean, we all relate to this, right? So the question is, how? As we kind of start peeling the onion back here, how did they do this? And I think, again, we all kind of look at it and say, well, it's about the apps, right? It's about this app ecosystem, right? That's really where the business value was. That's where we enjoyed, this shift, this enormous shift in various processes, whether it's Uber or Airbnb. There's a variety of examples out there, but it's about the app, right? But more than that, what Apple understood was that they could strategically open up iOS. They could open certain APIs. They could create an SDK. They could democratize the access to their incumbency, right? They could actually provide access and proliferate access into iOS for others to build against, others to develop value against. And this is the key in becoming a platform-based company. So just to kind of provide a little more detail on this again, it's this shift in the value chain that really matters, from linear to platform and ecosystem-based, right? So traditional kind of management theory will have us all understand the Porter value chain, right? I'm sure many people in this room understand the Porter value chain, right? It's all about these inimitable assets and resources that you control as a firm, right? And how you put them together in this linear model to create value for a customer, right? From raw materials, right? Or various IP in terms of the intellectual property you have for services, through distribution, marketing, and to the consumer. But what platform-driven business models understand is that value creation is not just an internal function. It's not just something that you focus on as a firm, right? That tremendous amounts of value actually can come from opening up your incumbency and allowing others to develop capabilities against that, right? And so that's fundamentally the shift here. And you can see here in this iterative model, what happens with platform-driven business models is a network effect. As more producers come into the platform and they publish in more capability and more consumers derive value out, and you keep going around in this sort of circular fashion, you start to really pull away from that closed and proprietary company, right, that you're competing against. And so it's these platform-driven business models that are really starting to take hold. Now, the number one charge that I kind of get against this idea, kind of debate it out a little bit with you here, is, well, that makes sense for software. I get it for software. But what about asset-intensive industries? Why does a mine care about this? Why does a hospital care about this? Right? And I think you can see here, the point is that it doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's asset-intensive, where it's more of a mixed asset industry, or an asset-light industry where you're a pure software play. The whole idea is you can open up your incumbency, instrument it, interconnect it, and make it intelligent and allow others the ability to develop against that. So General Electric, right, they make wind turbines, jet engines, a whole variety of really heavy industrial stuff, things, right? Predix is their cloud-based platform as a service. And the C-suite of GE talk about this all the time when they're on stage, all about the role of the developer. The developer is the new kingmaker, right? And I have to be able to expose, as I instrument what I do and I open up access and I IP connect that, there's an enormous amount of value that can be created by applications that can understand that data, build on the streams of that data that are coming out of those things, right? And so we're starting to get into this idea of IoT, right? The connected car, another huge opportunity, and all of the value here will be around software. And so the idea is that you as a proprietary and closed firm, you can't possibly create all that value yourself. You have to open up. You have to be more transparent. And I think this is the challenge that a lot of incumbents face, is the challenger business model is platform-based, and everything they've done to that point, these large incumbents, has been around closed and proprietary kind of product development or approaches to go to market. And it's not just about the tech, it fundamentally challenges the business model and the actual sort of sales and ecosystem building activities you have to do. So just kind of put a point on this, there's really 3 new rules of strategy that are coming out around this idea around platform, right? The first one is that it's all about resource orchestration, right? So again, it's not about this internal model where you're focused on your own assets and controlling those resources and IP so your competitor doesn't get a hold of them, right? It's all about being open and orchestrating resources and having that coalesce, that ecosystem value coalesce on you rather than on that of your competitor's platform or around their products. It's this idea of moving from internal optimization, right? Sort of continuous improvement models, Lean Six Sigma, very internally focused on waste and all these kinds of things, to actually amplifying external interactions. And it's about that network effect I was talking about, right? You want to be able to build that ecosystem. As you open up, you provide the API, you want to foster a huge ecosystem around what you do, right? Because if they're building on you, they're not building on your competitor, and that puts you in a position where you can win. And finally, it's all about the ecosystem value in aggregate, right? And so again, it really flies in the face of I'm doing these set of things in this linear model to create value for a customer, when it's much more around creating ecosystem value, which will automatically be derived in the way the customer actually consumes your product or service. And all of this has to be founded on a strong technology foundation. You're not going to get to this model unless you're starting to think about how can you consume things in an as-a-service model from a provider. If it's not core to what you do and how you think about your future and your future differentiation, you really should think about how do you consume that as a service from a provider, right? You want to get that heavy lifting out of your way and you want to simply consume it as a service. The second thought here is, again, as things digitize, in my simplistic definition, it simply means they become software driven. The developer is the kingmaker of value, right? The absolute kingmaker of value in this digital era. Your API strategy. So again, it's not just simply, well, I just open everything up. That'd be silly, right? You have to be very deliberate around what is the architecture. How are you going to expose yourself as an API, right? And what APIs will become open as you start to digitize and become increasingly software driven. At Cisco, we recently had Aaron Levy come in, who's the founder of Box, and sit down with our C-level, right, with Chuck and the leadership team. And at the end of that day, the question was asked of him. He's a bit of a rock star founder. He's a great follow on Twitter, if any of you guys on social media. Very funny guy. And he said, you know, the takeaway kind of statement, Chuck said, what's the number one thing you could leave us all with, the management team with, in terms of what we should be doing and how we should be thinking about our future at Cisco? And Levy's answer was, just give me the open API, right? Just give me the API. And that's really demonstrative of how all of these startups think about value creation. I saw it firsthand, right? They totally understand that they've got to build an open software-based platform, and that's going to be the way they actually win in the future. User experience. I think many people so far today have talked about how important design is. Design and creating and achieving differentiation through beautiful design, right? And the customer and user experience, the UI. As things become increasingly self-serve and we're interacting through digital means, that user experience is absolutely critical. And finally, data. As things digitize, they create a footprint, a data footprint. And so how do you start to think about data as a means to differentiate your offer ongoing, how you actually evolve it? So with that as kind of a kickoff, I guess, around how we're starting to think about, you know, the new rules of strategy at Cisco, what does that mean to us, right? Because, you know, I'll be the first one to say, I joined Cisco, I'm from a software background, right? I'm software, I spent 4 years in New York working with ISVs and developers. And, you know, many of you would say, well, you just sell routers and switches, right? That's what you do at Cisco. And I think that, you know, that is both our challenge, but it's an unprecedented opportunity for our company, right? 20 billion devices, 50 billion devices, connected by 2020 with the Internet of Things. I mean, the ever-rising levels of connectivity, a huge tailwind for our business. But what I wanted to start walking you through here is how are we actually starting to adopt this idea of openness, this idea of platform, right? Because I think it'd be, you know, fair to say that a lot of people would say, well, Cisco, you're really closed, right? That's what you've always been like. Through the command line, Cisco proprietary, you know, you're suing Aruba. You know, there's a whole bunch of things going on, right, around what you might say. But what I want to hopefully leave you with today is this idea that this point around openness and platform is fundamentally, it is so seriously taken by our C-level, right, in terms of how we're actually trying to change the company. And these are the 5 principles that we're looking at in terms of digitizing Cisco. So, and you'll actually see, well, actually I should mention later on this afternoon, I know you're hearing from Salesforce from Tom, and we actually, I think, maybe just stole one of the key guys over there who came to Cisco. He's now, Kevin Bandy's now a Chief Digital Officer. And this is actually, I'm sort of shamelessly grabbing a chart from Kevin here around his model for digitizing Cisco. So this is coming directly from Salesforce, and I know many in the room here have embraced Salesforce and a lot of the model around how they actually do business with you. So it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that, you know, the first pillar of our strategy here is simplification. We have to become simple. What does that mean for us? It means everything we do in terms of building our own products, building our own offers, our business units want to consume as a service, right? As a service. So I'll talk a lot more about that in a second. In terms of cloud, if we're not consuming it as a service, where we are going to build from the ground up, how are we actually thinking about our hybrid footprint, right? What are we going to do on the Cisco cloud, and what will we actually embrace the public cloud for, right? The idea that the future is really built around hybrid cloud is very important to our transformation as well. Now, security. I mean, there is no, I think, more critical topic that I see come up as I travel around APJ and talk with our service provider partners than security. I mean, this is high and right on every Magic Quadrant, every IDC study, every C-level exec that we come across. Security in the cloud, across the network, and at the endpoint. So we'll touch a little bit more on that. We've already covered this point that data is the new natural resource in the world, right? You know, Gartner are kind of talking about the fact that your ability to write algorithms against data will be the means by which you create a competitive advantage in the not too distant future. Because as everything starts to digitize, you know, there starts to be a sameness to that digitization. So the next wave is the data that gets created is actually where the differentiation will lie. So embedding analytics into everything we do at Cisco within our own offers, so our BUs have that kind of instrumentation, is really critical, serving that insight back to our line of business leaders. And then customer experience. It's absolutely king. And on this point at Cisco, we've actually just put 3,000 people into a customer success function that's going to provide an ability for us to move from, and again, speaking very candidly, from a net 30-day model, right? We saw routers and switches in our core business in the past on a net 30 to cash, right? The shift is all to annuity and to recurring revenue, to as a service for our customers, right? And so at Cisco, in the last quarter, 10% of our revenue actually came off the balance sheet, right, from the deferred revenue bucket. So we're well underway on this transformation in terms of making Cisco an annuity-based as-a-service company and ensuring that our customers can enjoy, you know, the fully sort of featured use of our products and are adopting them. And that more than that, it's really driving the outcome they desire and need to serve their end customers. That's critical. And that's why we're putting 3,000 people into that customer success function globally to make sure we get this customer experience piece right. So the operating model, right? I want to talk about that first pillar, and we're really just going to focus on the operating model, on cloud, and on security today. So the first one is the operating model. So what does this mean to us at Cisco, right? As I've already said, we are not shy, and we certainly don't walk away from the fact that at our core, we're an infrastructure company, right? We're an infrastructure company, and we are transforming increasingly to software-defined, right? So we've obviously got a rich data center business, route switch, compute, and a variety of different capabilities that lie there in the core of our infrastructure business. But at the layer above that, we have to start moving towards as a service, being able to turn that infrastructure into a dynamic and elastic resource for our business units to build their offers on. So we're very focused on that. But more than that, at the layer above that in the stack, our business units don't want to have to deal with infrastructure. They just want to build their software offers, right? That's where the focus is, because that's where our customers need our help. That's where the business outcomes are. So we're very, very focused on this idea of platform, of the infrastructure being open and programmable, everything that we do. But we also embrace at that platform layer the various PaaS capabilities that are out there in the market, right? So ensuring that infrastructure works with the likes of a Cloud Foundry or a Red Hat OpenShift. We're doing a lot with containers right now. You know, Cisco's core business is mainly around route switch, right? And as that virtualizes, which is what we're seeing with SDN and NFV, the software comes out of the box and typically gets run in the cloud. So we're looking at things like Docker around the containerization of virtual network functions, for example. So we're really focused on this idea that at the platform layer, it's about how you develop the app, right? How you develop the app. Now, business units want to get a lot of the underlying things out of the way, right? They want to have these great application development experiences. Data, right? This idea of turning data into a service and bringing it back to our line of business leaders so they can act on those insights. So we work with Hadoop, Apache Spark, a lot of the open standards in the industry. But we also just launched Tetration, Cisco Tetration, which is a really very interesting kind of offer that we've built, which we're using internally at Cisco. And what it's about is we can put sensors in our 9K switches and software sensors in the host operating system. So whether you can see on the private cloud side in the data center or out in the public cloud through the software sensor, what it does is it gives you an ability to have visibility into every single event in the data center, every single event. We took a team out of Google to build Cisco Tetration, right? Analytics for your hybrid cloud footprint. Why is this important? Because we know we have to be secure. We know we have to be compliant. We know the IT department needs control. Shadow IT starting to happen, right? And so how do we actually make sure? Through Cisco Tetration. So this has been a tremendous kind of piece of development that we've done recently and something that we're really enjoying the benefits of internally at Cisco. Continuous delivery, right? So speed. I think, Peter touched on this early on as well. There's this real notion today that agility beats planning, hands down. The new corporate DNA you've got to shoot for is agility. It's about speed. How can you build, measure the feedback from your customer, learn quickly and implement it, right? And you get into these iterative loops and act on customer feedback quickly, right? And these startups, they talk about the pivot. And so the secret to the pivot, if you do need to pivot, is reducing the cycle time between these build, measure, learn loops. Every time you go through one, you make a decision, you want to be able to reduce the cycle time of those loops so you can move quickly, right? So this is embracing a bunch of tools. Agile, with Rally software, we've moved a huge swath of Cisco's engineering across to Agile. Not to say Agile is the bee's knees for everything. It certainly is fit for purpose for a lot of what we do. Jenkins for continuous delivery. A lot of tool sets here that are helping us move at speed in the way we actually develop our offers. And of course, at the top of the stack, it's about the apps. This is all leading to the fact that the application is where the value is, and that's really where we're increasingly focusing as a company. But security, everything has to be secure. So we talk about our security everywhere strategy, right? In the cloud, across the network, and at the endpoint. And so what I want to talk a little bit about now as we kind of transition into security is introduce you to somebody, actually. He's introduced you to a gentleman here. This guy's name is Willie Sutton. Willie was the most prolific bank robber in US history. He was active in the early 1900s, and he robbed, and this is big money back then, he robbed $2 million, right, in a 40-year career, physically robbed, right, Tommy guns and all, right, big effort from the banks in the US. And, you know, he's kind of, when he was asked about these things, he kind of said, look, you know, the banks have the cash, so I robbed the banks, right? So there's no flaw in his logic. But, you know, we've been talking about what the new world's currency is, right? And we kind of, I think we all agree that that's data, right? And so by that measure, everybody in this room is potentially a bank, right? So I want to ask you for a second, just to imagine in your mind, what is the 21st century face of Willie Sutton? What does the 21st century face of a Willie Sutton look like? I'll show you here. I'm not sure if this is what you had in your head, maybe? I don't know. Probably not. And this is not stock photography, right? So I want to introduce you to another sort of actor in our story here. This is Olga Kamova. And Olga is right now sitting in a prison in Thailand, awaiting extradition to the US, an alleged mastermind of a cybersecurity crime ring, right, of a global cybersecurity crime ring that stole $28 million from US and British banks in the first 6 months of 2016. So in the first 6 months of this year, Olga stole 14 times the amount from banks, and Willie took over a 40-year career, right? So it's incredible. So how did she do that? And this video here will give you a bit of an idea.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. That's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicart, set to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO.
So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, this is Rajiv in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't.
Katie, are you on your way into the office? Something's going on with our file servers.
Karen in HR, our benefits dashboard seems really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Give me a call when you get this. Joining conference now.
Apparently, there's a malware attack targeting our main...
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage.
We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. Just pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know that
Just
they'll...
pay it. Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now.
Okay, it's done.
I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us.
They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicards is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed
customers.
lower today, led by Qualicards, which was down 14% on news that the recent data breach may be far worse than the company
Its stock
originally
fell to a
acknowledged.
new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's above my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
So how do you feel after that, right? I mean, it hits you in the pit of your stomach, I think. It frightens me every time I see it. I see Chuck Robbins hates that, by the way. Obviously, we're a bank too, right? So, I think the point here is, what's going on here with ransomware is incredible, right? So in the first quarter of 2015, there was $24 million stolen in terms of ransomware extorted from companies. In the first quarter of this calendar year, it was $209 million. That's why the FBI is saying it's now a $1 billion run rate. I mean, this is real. 4,000 companies a day being extorted by ransomware in the US. Because it takes 4 days for Bitcoins to clear, all of the US banks hold Bitcoin for this reason, to be able to react quickly in the case of being locked out of critical systems. So what's actually happening here is obviously it's malware, it's malicious, there's malicious intent, a user's clicking on something, code's launching, and a ransomware payload goes to work, right? So what do we do? What are we actually doing at Cisco to protect ourselves and also our customers, right, as it pertains to security? So it's all about a multi-layered approach. It's kind of the idea of security everywhere. So we have Cisco Umbrella, right? OpenDNS. It was based on an acquisition of OpenDNS, where every device requires DNS that's connected, and so we turn DNS into a security tool to be able to stop it at that point, right? We have over 250,000 of our firewalls out across our customer base today, moving across to our next-gen firewall capabilities, which at that next layer allows us to be able to block the connection. Web security email tools, but also an interesting part of the puzzle here is the next layer, which is that we don't pretend to sell silver bullets when it comes to security. It is about multi-layered protection. And Cisco Stealth Watch is a capability where we look at NetFlow data, we look at the IP traffic, and we can actually start to answer really important questions like, how long has this thing been in the network? What's it doing? Where did it go, right? The average time it takes to detect malware, 100 days, right? 100 days. So really important part of the portfolio. And we've also just been working a lot on our advanced malware protection around endpoint, right? So in the cloud, across the network, and at the endpoint. And for us, the Cisco on Cisco story here is pretty impressive. I mean, in terms of the OpenDNS component, it's a fantastic capability, and we were able to roll that out within less than a day. Really, really simple stuff, but the level of protection is quite incredible. So I want to transition now and probably try and make up a little bit of time here on hybrid cloud. So this is the part of the business that I actually look after at the moment. Our cloud business as it pertains to all the work we do with service providers in partnership with our SPs. And the opening here, I want to kind of bust this myth, right, that all roads lead to the public cloud. And I think that AWS did a really good job trying to convince people that was the case, that if you're sophisticated, you're just all in on the public cloud, right? Andy Jassy, who runs AWS, had GE on stage and Capital One, all these guys saying, yep, we're out of the data center business. But it's just not true, right? I mean, we don't see that. We absolutely don't see it. We don't see it for a whole variety of reasons around security, control, compliance, cost, actually. We're seeing a huge amount of workloads coming back from the public cloud for reasons of cost. But we did a study here which kind of looked into this question, which was, this is with IDC. What do we see in terms of companies that are really optimizing their use of hybrid cloud? And what we actually see, in fact, is that their use of private cloud and public cloud is actually quite highly correlated. And as they become a little bit more sophisticated and move from sort of the left of this chart to the right, they actually increase pretty well in step with each other, right? So the most optimized companies are actually using private cloud and public cloud in fairly equal measure. However, only 3%, that sort of number right on the right there, only 3% of companies actually feel as though, despite having a hybrid cloud strategy, that they've actually been able to optimize that strategy. So what does this mean for us at Cisco? How do we actually approach hybrid? And so what we believe in is, because of the proliferation of SaaS models, or public cloud players, that you're effectively going and connecting to a variety of different clouds, right? So the network has become more important in this era around hybrid cloud rather than less important, which I think a lot of the players would try and have you believe. So we fundamentally believe in this idea of a policy-centered model for hybrid cloud. So let me kind of build this up for you. So at the bottom layer of the chart here, we're really focused on, in all of our hardware, openness. To the point earlier around platform, right? If you're not opening up what you're doing and providing access to it via an API, in a deliberate and strategic way, then you kind of need to step aside, right? Because we are going to go open, and it will be a programmable resource in terms of our core infrastructure business. At the next layer of the stack here, what you're actually seeing with that policy is this idea, and again, Peter touched on this with the SDN. We have our application-centric infrastructure approach, ACI approach to SDN, and it allows us to take application profiles, network security profiles, and sort of bring them into sort of one central way of actually being able to allow the application to dynamically influence what it needs from the infrastructure, right? Whether that's across a virtual or physical kind of set of resources in the network. Above that, of course, you've got to be able to build out the actual private cloud itself, and we have a variety of partnerships around our integrated infrastructure offers with vBlocks and FlexPods. We're working with Nimble Storage and Pure Storage recently. So we do a lot in terms of the different integrated infrastructures that we offer around private cloud stacks. But again, we know we have to be able to extend this policy model outside the footprint of your data center, right? Because you need that sort of security, compliance, and control posture no matter where the workload is, right? So we need to be able to extend the policy model kind of against an as-a-service foundation with regards to where those workloads run and reside at any point in time. So to kind of bring this a little bit more to the fore here, you see on the left-hand side of the chart, this is another representation of our approach. It's kind of the data center around our application-centric infrastructure. You sort of see multi-departments here, different departments. With ACI 2.0, we've just announced like multi-floor, multi-site, multi-buildings. You can have multiple ACI pods and sort of treat that as one set of pooled resources. Tremendous benefits in terms of network provisioning and things of that nature. But you need to be able to extend that into the public cloud. So we recently acquired a company called Clicker, which Clicker is a multi-cloud management tool that allows you to effectively abstract away the underlying data center architecture, whether it's a private cloud or a public cloud architecture, and create and sort of model the application, right? No matter what sort of a tiered app it is, right? In the topology modeler in Clicker. And that allows you to effectively, through a northbound API out of ACI, bring Clicker and ACI together so you can actually create and set that policy in the data center, but then extend that out into the public cloud through Clicker. And Clicker supports up to 20 different private and public cloud kind of architectures. So this is really, really central to our approach to hybrid and our approach to kind of SDN in the data center. And it's really aimed at giving you that stability, that security, as I mentioned, that you want to enjoy in the private cloud sort of footprint in the data center side, but being able to extend that out into the public cloud side with hybrid. And finally here, we've deployed, again, this Cisco ACI. So our Cisco on Cisco kind of story here is we've achieved a lot more agility in terms of our ability to provision the network services, significant reductions in capital costs, management costs, power and cooling as well, and certainly got a lot more out of the resources in terms of utilization. But with that, I probably want to close here and just kind of leave with you the final thoughts, right? So we've talked a lot, covered a bit of ground here around digital transformation. But really, there's kind of 6 principles, right, that I would have you sort of take away, which is you've really got to get after this idea of enabling a new business model. What does it mean to you? Are you going to become a platform? Are you going to participate in the platforms of others? And this goes beyond just software companies. I mean, Walmart is talking about, I got a buddy there, he's talking about what's the Walmart API, right? I mean, it's bricks and mortar, it's across every style of company. Where you can, embrace consuming as a service from a provider. Get the heavy lifting out of your way. Focus on your core and how you're going to transform that with a new business model. Where you do want to build digital services, how you build them is critical. Continuous delivery, moving at speed, agile methodologies, Microservices. I mean, I don't get too technical, I get way out of my depth here, but the point is this idea of loosely coupled, bounded context in microservices in terms of app development, really, really important. Data. Data is the basis for competitive advantage in the future. So take it seriously. What is your data strategy, right? Just like we sort of said earlier, to ask yourself, what is your developer strategy? What is the data strategy? I mean, these are things we're grappling with every day at Cisco. And security. We really need to be able to secure everything. I mean, particularly with IoT, as things become IP connected, and that is just an exponential wave that's coming at us. We need to be able to secure everything for the economic stability of our country. So with that, again, I just want to thank the GCOM team. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you very much. And I'll be here throughout the afternoon, so I look forward to talking to you. Cheers.